We are live with Skate Hang Live, and I am so pleased to have everyone here. We're going to go ahead and just go around, and oh gosh, I have it on. And so we're going to go around and do quick introductions from everyone that's in this chat today. So we'll just go around. Whoever wants to start first, let's do it.
Nose goes.
Oh! So nobody.
All right, cool.
Why don't you start? It's your thing.
I'll go. Okay. All right. Hey everyone. Name's Rev, or I go by my real name, Shanice. This is
Havoc or Angel.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey. Okay. I'm A-Bomb. People also know me as Francis or Abominatrix. That's me.
My name is Rollicky, or as I produce myself as JaQuan.
Next. I'm SkateWytch or Kathleen.
I'm Sage. I'm in charge of
I'm
Orbit
Amy or
Instagram.
Awesome. And I'm Boom.
Wow.
Yeah. All right. We're gonna start this chat. We are waiting on Shell as well, and then we have Dramamama that might be coming in a little bit later, just to give everyone a heads up that is watching. So we are going to start with talking about some Black history. So I would like to just open up the conversation. If there's anything that you would want to talk about with the history, things that maybe you haven't heard, or you've heard, but maybe other people haven't heard of before.
Ames was talking earlier about kind of kicking it off with a little bit of history.
Was that your way to pass the buck?
Yeah, kind of.
It's all good. Yeah, what I had mentioned earlier was how Black and brown skaters have and continue to be X'd out of the history of roller skating, or at least not as an important factor as, when you think of roller skating, you think very non-POC. And I don't know how many folks, but I don't know like what the rules are in terms of like what we can and can't talk of, and if like, of course everything done in good taste, but I don't know if folks follow a particular skater. They voiced a concern and stress about an owner of a brand, Moxie Skates, doing a video about the history of roller skating, and intentionally skipped or X'd out or didn't bother to like talk anything about Black skaters and our contribution to to this sport, especially on a super creative, super like soulful level. And that's norm. We expect it, but we also don't want to stay silent anymore about that. I feel like I don't know who's tuning into this. I wish I understood, like, because we also don't like to like preach to the choir. I feel like folks might know some of the history, but how many folks, I guess, show of hands, know a gentleman by the name of Bill Butler?
Oh, that's that. Oh, whew.
Yeah.
That just sounds familiar.
That man is gorgeous.
SkateWytch was like, meh. So that excitement.
I know the name.
I want to pass it on to. Oh, I don't know how to say your name, but you were just so excited just now.
Oh my God.
So
Rollicky.
Rolla.
Rollicky, yeah.
Can I assume that that's what it means? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
So, from the way I've learned things, being a military brat, I've moved around so many different places. So I don't come across history like just searching it anymore, because there's not very much on there about him. especially if you search through YouTube, there's like a few videos, and it never really fully goes in depth about the history of it. But where I've learned it is through different skaters at the rink, because there are certain styles, like the style that he created, being that it's based up in like that New Jersey, New York area. A lot of the people I know who do that style have given me words of like how you're supposed to manage your skating through it. It's almost like trying to learn about the history of something. Is really you're not being told too much, but you're just learning how they skated. I've never been fully good at like explaining that.
It sounds like
That's all good. So
the
yeah, if
physical
anybody else wanted to
expression
jump
of
in.
Is the history.
Yeah, the physical expression is the history. Much like swing dancing has a deep, deep rooted history in Black culture, and the movement and the root of it comes from a very specific place. And then throughout history, it's been like morphed and in some ways like whitewashed and forgotten in some ways, and some, not everybody. But I feel like skating has a tendency to travel that same trajectory, a lot to do with like the entertainment industry and stuff. But this guy's style, like what you're saying, to learn it, to know it, is to do it.
Yeah. Like one of the older fellas at my rink, his name's Raul. He used to skate with him back in like way back when, and he's been teaching me all the movements. But the way he explains it, he never tells me anything about the style. He just tells me I have to focus and like listen to the music more than anything, and that'll lead into me learning more, because he'll give me the moves and then I'll take it somewhere else, and then somebody will give me some knowledge about that. So it's like as you do the style, the people who do it will come to you, or you can see them and ask them questions about how they got into it or what they know about the history of it.
It's very, would you say that it's a very,
that. So,
oh, sorry.
So one sec, I just want to inject really quickly. So yes, his style is very important to know, but what makes Bill and what basically roller skating as we know it, in terms of like the way that rinks allow certain music to be played and for the birth of something like a roller disco to happen, Bill was the person to make that happen, right? So Bill's originally from Detroit, and he's a military. Sorry?
No, you're good.
Oh, no, you're good.
Am I cutting up?
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. It was cutting up a little bit on my end. Okay, cool. So he's from Detroit. If I'm not mistaken, he was also in the military, and I think he was stationed out in Brooklyn. And he was looking for a place to skate because, of course, you know, Detroit is the birthplace of a lot of things, right? Including the relationship that African Americans have had with roller skating, you know, making the best of whatever access they have. Anyway, so Bill goes to a local rink, which at the time was in Brooklyn, Empire Roller Rink, and couldn't really get down to the norm. The norm was like organ music, and I feel like a lot of us have heard this, right? We've heard the story about like roller rinks had organ music played. That was what the tradition was for, because of course skating was an elite action. It was meant for rich people who had the time, and so, you know, that was the style of it. Yeah, so that's Empire. Anyway, he decides he wants to ask, you know, to really push for them to play a particular James Brown song. And the way that he says it and the way that a lot of other people who have experienced it that was the beginning of roller disco as we know it. So, you know, the style of his skating is so legendary, but even the way that we were introduced to skating in our lives in a very mainstream way actually started with this one individual. And that's what we mean about Black folks being X'd out of skate culture, where, you know, the story, the line, the lineage of like this birthplace of this particular style of skating is still not tied to a Black man. I don't know if other folks wanted to add more to that. Yeah.
Well, this is definitely something I just learned today. Yeah. Like, you telling this story is not something that is familiar or accessible. Especially, we've been playing roller derby for about 7 years, And even though that's a completely different sport, it's still kind of like roller skating. You'd be surprised there's not like a cross blending of like, I guess, these kinds of occurrences available.
It's almost like our history for roller skating, like the Black, African American, all that. It's almost like a word of mouth type history, sort of like any type of like urban legend. It's weird that we have to spread it like that, but lately we've been getting more documentaries about everything that we do. And like I think in the last 2-3 years, there's been a couple documentaries for it with United Skates, and then
Roller Dreams. It's
yeah,
one, the beach scene.
yeah. So it's like it's starting to people are starting to become more interested in wanting to know our history rather than just seeing like the generic history off of old school documentaries from like the 60s.
Yeah, and also I feel like when I came into skating through roller derby, there was no like, you had to really search for stuff. You had to search for information. You had to search for skates. You had to search for the learning that you wanted to. Oh my God, I saw somebody that I know on this screen. But it's a really cool time to see documentaries like these that are out there for everybody to really see what's been happening. Like the relationship between communities, individuals, skating, style, and the way that cities actually try to control groups of people is related as well. So like the underground scene of skating in terms of like Black culture has never really necessarily been underground. It's been like a part of the family. It's been a part of like your weekday routine. And with rinks disappearing, that history is like being snuffed out. So the fact that documentaries have come up while this snuffing out of buildings for people to actually meet and congregate in is like incredibly critical. It's almost like the timing of all of this coming to the general public is like, it's just necessary. It's necessary.
And I remember you saying that it was hard to find skates at first.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was searching for the very first time, when you type in like jam skating, it never comes up as like the rhythm skating type of boot. It's always like the low cut, vanilla type skate. And it's almost like, and I think if I'm right, if I remember this correctly, I was told that the style of Bill Butler was called jamming from one of my like older people that I learned from. That's what they explained to me, and I was like, oh, okay. So how do you like explain that? Like, how do you explain why a rhythm boot is so lost inside the search menu, and why we don't know it as rhythm skating, or if we don't know it as jamming skating?
That is such a great question.
Because I know a lot of people can't find them.
I feel like it's a very meaningful question. Because when you do look for skates, like you get flooded with a speed boot style, which is what you're talking about. That vanilla skate boot, that low cut, is a speed boot style. And I remember looking for skates, and that was like you were bombarded with that particular style.
And like I know that specific. I know like having that style of skate isn't like perfect, like needed to be for rhythm skating, because if you look at how people in Atlanta skate, there are some people like Push and a lot of those guys who do skate the lower skate and have like a specific style for it. But it's like you can't really find too much when it's being packed over. Our history is being packed over with like a certain like way of phrasing things.
Yeah. And I feel like when I was looking just timing wise, like in terms of like what was being produced at the time when I was coming into skating, I was coming through like the resurgence of roller derby. right? So that boot, that low cut boot was like everywhere. And that's what I would see a majority of the time. There were a few people that I knew and I met that had a totally different style boot that was more in line with either figure or like what you're talking about, the jam style, that was far more structured and would open and like blossom in this really beautiful way. But you would never see that in roller derby. It was always like this specific style of skate. So it's interesting that you say that. And I wonder, it's got me like, my brain is like, what is with that?
So on another note, when y'all, or Ames, is that what it is? When you first got in, who was the person that like you found all your information from, or where did you find your information from so other people can search it up?
There's no one place. It's through years. But I think that information is way more accessible than when I first started learning and teaching myself about it. So there is another documentary. You might have to, I think it's like on Amazon. I'm maybe Sage might know the name because we
Is it the one
both
about
shared
Venice?
a post recently about like, not Venice. So the one,
Okay.
so there's a doc that came out before that.
Mm-hmm.
Carajo. So
Is
you
it
guys
Soul
just
Skate?
Google,
Because
like,
I
Bill
have.
Butler.
I'm sorry. I searched it.
It's similar. It's similar to, it says Soul something. But anyway, that's
Okay.
a documentary that talks a lot about the history, and you also have older cats in that film talk about, you know, like just more about the history from like a first person position. For me, I found everything online, but also through word of mouth. A lot of it is just like you'd have to either like look in certain books, and you know, if folks are interested and folks who are watching, like maybe we can share like books and more documentaries. But it's not that well documented the way that it should be. So a lot of it is through like urban legend and through word of mouth. But yeah, you can definitely Google a lot of this information. So I'm wondering what other parts of the history is it that we want to touch on. And I think what might make the conversation a little more challenging is that I wish we did have, and also I don't know where folks are based, but like there's like a lot of history from like Atlanta and even directly from Detroit and Chicago and all these very like that communities that have skating part of like their everyday lives. Like I don't know enough about like how that went about in those areas. So there's still so much more to learn.
Hey, Shell, can you hear us okay? Do you want to chime in on this? Oh, hold on.
Shell?
I unmute. It looks like you're muted, but you're here. I'm trying to unmute you, but because Shell's got a lot of history to share, and I am dying to hear it. So I'm hoping we can get that video sorted. But yeah, so I'll just let you all take the floor, though, as we try to get the technical issues taken care of. Did you maybe want to talk? I mean, there's a lot of.
I'm just listening in
Sure.
for this part, but I'm just listening in for this part. But I feel like something that I brought up in conversation with someone recently was the concept of adult night and how that got started, because that wasn't something that I really looked into until the United Skates documentary. Mm-hmm. So maybe someone here would like to speak on to that a little bit more.
I can't necessarily chime in on how it was utilized in like history on exactly when it got started. But what I do know is that in my region where I grew up, the rinks have started doing like adult nights to control the type of demographic that they want in their rinks. And this really bothered me, and I discovered it as an adult. I discovered it. I'll just walk you through how I discovered what this was. As a child, I'd go to the rink and you do your thing, and I never really thought about it. Nothing really crossed my mind much, because as a kid, I'd go, skate a little bit, leave, didn't really think much about it. But as an adult, like, I started skating in Hawaii. There was nowhere to buy skates. There was no rink available. You really made it on your own. And we were joking before we got started about sweeping up places and making a skate place for yourself. And that's kind of where, like, I've always had this like real grassroots attitude about skating. Like, we're going to make it happen anywhere. Like, we'll figure it out. And so when I moved back to California and I wanted to host like skate parties, but also host like lessons that were more alternative to what the programming was at all of the rinks in my region. And I mean all of the rinks in the Northern California region, because I had to knock on every single door to try to create something. And I was met with a lot of the same attitudes about it. And I would try like every couple years to like revamp my programming and come back in and like repitch it. And one year I was going through the rounds.
So I just want to take a second.
Oh,
I really want us to take a second to really think about some of our answers, because
okay.
And you know, apologies to interject, but I really want us to kind of hone in on really try to center the conversation around Blackness, and just to answer that, I wanted to give somebody else an opportunity to talk about it. But adult nights, as you saw in United Skates, that was a code that's just been throughout tradition, right? Like, they used Soul Night. Soul Night was code for Black Night. So, you know, when you know, during the civil rights movement and folks are fighting against segregation, that was still something that we still have very, very, very prominent in our culture. As someone who has attempted to bringing non-themed skate nights, you know, I know firsthand how much that still worries rinks, right? Of the type of demographic that they're worried of having only of.
Right.
So it still exists through funk night, through R&B night, through adult night. Like, these are all codes for a particular demographic that's still practiced, and that comes from segregation. That comes from particular nights only being allowed, you know, once a week to Black people. So yeah, so I want us to try our best to try to kind of catch ourselves when we start too much on the me, because this is how people get left out of conversation, and this is how you know, really important pieces of knowledge that we want to take away. You know, we miss that opportunity when
and
it gets lost.
I absolutely hear you in that, and I was being far too long-winded in it. But the point that I was trying to make was, people mistake me a lot of times.
It happens.
And they do, and they'll be like, oh, they get really comfortable with who they think I am, right? Because I'm mixed, and they'll see me and they'll go like, this white girl or whatever. And they'll say stuff to me that is insanely shocking. And what happened while I was doing this was, this rink owner straight up told me to my face, very comfortably, very like secure. And it was heartbreaking, because my niece was just off to the side and they couldn't see her, but she experienced the whole thing. And it was heartbreaking, because she experienced for the first time someone flat out saying that they didn't want Black people in their rink. They straight up, like, they said a particular demographic was the word that was being used in all of the rinks. That was the code. And I said, what does that mean? Explain to me what a particular demographic is. I need you to explain that to me, because I don't get it. I've been working really hard. I've been at this for years. I'm from here. Like, I just want to be a part of this community. Why can't you just let me in?
Why can't you just let me in?
Hey, Shell, can you hear us okay?
There's that echo.
I hear you.
Yeah. So it was just more like shocking and just
One second, I want to see if we can hear Shell or not.
One second, I want to see if we can hear Shell or not.
I hear you.
Would you like to add any input on like the Black History? Because we're talking. Yeah, let's get into it.
Hold on.
Is anyone getting feedback?
Right.
Yeah.
No? It's probably just me.
That's my. I think it's me.
You might have to put on headphones.
It seems like it's looping too.
Yeah.
It seems like it's looping too.
Yeah.
Shell, I'm just gonna put
I'm
your
sorry,
mic on
guys.
for now.
I'm just gonna put your mic on for now.
Oh, we lost.
We lost it. We
I
really
also wanted
bad
to say
connection.
I'm
Sorry.
that you guys, I'm sorry you guys experienced that. That couldn't have been easy to experience, but that's just a little taste of like this world that we live in, and you know, as Black and brown people have to deal with on an everyday basis. You know, it's like we don't get access to these places, and we've contributed so much, and yet we're still not valued in the same way.
And I also get frustrated
It's a hard
too
truth.
because people don't accept that hard truth as a true reality. It's real. It's a real thing that rinks are actively participating in to this day. And it was an attitude that was shared amongst the whole area, which to me says a lot about just the state in general. You know what I mean? So yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting as like an outsider seeing that, because where I lived before where I am now in Richmond, I was at like a smaller rink setting where it was never really that busy, but they had very interesting rules that I'd never really thought about, like your wheel size and, oh, you can't skate backwards. Oh, you can only go this direction and you can't be off to the side. Like there was all these different like stipulations on like what you could and couldn't do. And I never really thought anything of it until like later on, and like not seeing that so much in certain areas, but just seeing that those things are still in place in like smaller, like noticeable ways.
So even here, like in New York, we don't have many rinks.
Can you guys hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Shell, we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Don't go anywhere.
We all say don't go anywhere. We want you to stay.
Hello.
Yes?
Yeah, we can hear you. Thumbs up. Maybe you can't hear us though.
Oh, okay. Finally. All right. So
Cool.
I've been hearing everything back and forth. Back it up a little bit. Bill, he's originally from Detroit. That's what I know of him. My father did know him, but they didn't really get along too tough. So I don't know the story, but they knew each other from back in the day because they were kind of in the same age bracket. But he's done a lot for the community as far as roller skating is concerned. We got the movie Rollerboats. And then kind of moving it forward, we've got the documentary. I've been talking with folks about that recently. New Yorkers kind of had a certain kind of feeling about that documentary. It's a great start, but there was a lot of stuff that was like left untold still. So there was a lot of New York skaters that have been trying to come up with a way to capture New York skaters. My understanding is that we had about 38 or so skating in New York City, not New York State, New York City. And this was dated back in there's a gentleman by Eric All who actually put a post up in one of my group and brought that to light. I'm like, I had no idea. Now what we have left in New York, we have skating rinks on the outskirts, meaning like not in the city itself. We actually have one that's an actual skating rink left in New York City, which is Roller Jam, Staten Island. And I've never been there. But we've got what, Brooklyn House, which is not a skating rink, it's a gymnasium. We have right now we have USA, that's on Long Island, and there's a lot of other places that are further out on Long Island as upstate New York that are full rinks, but they're out of our reach. You have to like take a trip for like 2 or 3 hours to get there, literally.
And you also don't want to
So,
forget.
and I
Sorry.
skating rinks, not in the city. And what happened to us as skaters, at the stroke of midnight, the state troopers show up saying that we have to turn the music down because it's too loud. People in the neighborhood are complaining. So those are some of the other telltale signs that they don't want you there in the community. Other things, I heard people talking, they're kind of like put into a category, you can't do this, you can't do that. I remember in the 80s when I was in Florida, I would, as a skater, they said, oh, you can't skate backwards, you can't do fast skating, you can't turn at all. What's the point of skating if you can't do any of those things that qualifies as a rhythm skater or a jam skater? You can't do anything. You just go one revolution in a circle, that's it. That's all you can do. And this is in the 80s. So we're still moving forward and it's still vibrant.
Yeah, and actually, if everyone wants to maybe go around and talk about their personal experiences with racism in the skate community.
I just have a question for Shell. Can she hear me? Oh, no, she can hear me.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I can hear you.
Back then, because everything you said about hearing all the rules right
Go
now,
ahead.
I hear that every day. It's
I
kind
hear
of
you.
weird. Like hearing you like repeat what's going on. And now hearing it today, it kind of shocks me, but it's in a way like
Yep.
I never really like pay attention to that because they always say it's for safety reasons. And I never thought maybe if it wasn't for a safety reason, because children are around most of the time. But my question
No,
was,
it's not about children. No.
yeah, see, because that's it kind of pushed me off. Like I was like, whoa,
Right.
I lost
This
my
is a
question
regular
halfway through.
session that we would go to, and they would say that you can't turn, and there were no children in the ring.
Okay, because now it's just because there's children for us, and I was like, oh,
Yep.
The racism I've
Right.
experienced is that they feel that somehow making events 21 and over is a easier way to control. Like the younger you are, somehow that means the more violent that you are. I wanted to make the events 18 and over, and they really pushed back about that. And even more when I attempted to do all ages. So to me, what it read was, at least with some age, maybe you have some manners, but like, Black and brown teenagers are just too wild for us to consider, during this type of event, an event that they're playing hip hop music and R&B music, and, so that to me, it never felt right. It felt like there was no justification, right? Of like, why couldn't we open it up to younger folks? And I think there's just still this underlining racist prejudice that associates, violence to our people automatically.
I'll speak on the talking on the points of rings being open in New York City. So I believe when we lived there, the most accessible rink was 2 that were on Long Island, and then we heard one, I believe it was Hot Skates, that closed down a couple of years ago, or years 2 ago. But Long Island on a whole, the whole transit system getting to Long Island is racist in of itself because of the segregation between the urban development of New York City versus the suburbs of Long Island. So the accessibility from getting from the inner city to these places that was one barrier. because there weren't any real direct bus lines that went there. And I believe the beltways and the parkways were designed that kept public transportation from getting from the city to Long Island.
Yeah, like physically traveling to there. All the bridges were below a certain height to, not allow buses and other ways of mass transportation to get by.
So that's just one thing. So now going into like the community who were able to set up a grassroots in Long Island, taking over Hot Skates and United Skates, that was, I guess you could say a closer knit community, but the accessibility from people from Queens and Brooklyn getting to those places were a lot harder. So the venues that are accessible for those people are like, I think Dream Skate, boom, correct me, what is it called? Dreamlight, Rolling Lounge that takes over Prospect Park.
You're actually, I don't know if it's my reception, but it's breaking up a little bit.
Yeah,
It's breaking up for everyone?
just a little bit.
Just a titch. I'm trying to find out what the audio issue is.
So you had asked a question, right? Or maybe you didn't, but right before you said.
Yeah, I was trying to get the correct name
Brooklyn
of
and Queens
the.
not being able to get to Hot Skates.
Yeah. So, well, she was trying to figure out, because the only other place to skate beside those are in Brooklyn and Prospect Park, which is an outdoor.
Well,
rink.
it's a covered rink.
Yeah, it's a canopy rink.
But they usually do themed events that are more catered to the new residents of Brooklyn. It's not necessarily catered to the old heads.
The gentrifiers.
Yes, I guess you could say yes, gentrifiers.
Yes, to gentrifiers for sure.
So
we can
kind
say
of parties that happen in Manhattan and Brooklyn, like those, the skating culture is there, but it's definitely not even attempting to tap into the culture that is real, the skating culture that really is there. So it has a lot to do with location and the fact that people are very comfortable with erasure of like not tapping into or paying homage to certain elements of the skating community and trying to make it a full rounded event. I mean, I don't want to call out people, but also calling in is a great thing because this is great feedback that these organizers should be hearing, that there is a small community in New York City. I believe they meet up in Central Park. They're like old heads. If they're not very much in that skating culture of that, like, you know, those themed parties, then you're gentrifying. Have a conversation with yourself. What can you do differently?
Then also tap into the idea of making themed parties. Making themed parties and then not having, well, I guess it's pretty much what you're saying, like having theme parties and basically making what we would consider our culture a theme or just like something to put on for the night. And it's not our people showing up. So that's also something to consider.
Totally. I wanted to point out that both myself, so I produce events at Lakeside at Prospect Park. Rochelle and also Sage were all from New York. Bronx and Brooklyn alike, and yeah, I felt every word you said, and as someone who used to love looking at videos from Hot Skates, I just could never make my way over there either, because at the time I just didn't know skaters that would go, and then even if I wanted to get up the courage to like get on the Long Island Railroad and troop out there by myself, I just didn't feel safe about coming home late. So yeah, thank you for saying that, because we are very much still struggling with, you know, with access.
Yeah, that's I think to kind of touch on what Rolik said, like him kind of growing up in this and hearing the issues that were prevalent and rules that were placed to stop, you know, these communities from coming out. They're still ringing true today, you know, which kind of like, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's you know, it's saddening, you know what I'm saying? It's like almost like, you know, where's, it's like we need to make that push to kind of make these rules really make make them change, make them turn. Because we're still hearing, why is it an adult night? Why can't it just be a typical Tuesday night or another Thursday night? You know what I'm saying? Where we just get to show up and say what's up to our fam and enjoy ourselves, So
I was saying, like, why can't it be that simple? And there's a lot of like social hurdles that we have to deal with. Like this dialogue right now, I guarantee you it's some people's first time hearing these issues like echoed again from one generation to another, And
like, even with a lot of this stuff that's happening inside the rinks, I remember growing up at the skate park and my mom would drop me off. And there's plenty of times where I would have never thought I heard it, but my mom was called the N-word by a few of the skaters that were there.
Yeah, that shit for sure happens.
And like hearing that come out of their mouths at like 6, 7 years old, you really like, especially because like they try to talk to you like you're like one of them, being like half black, half white. So it kind of throws you off because you're like, I shouldn't be talking to these people if they're going to disrespect my mom, but why are they talking to me like this but talking to my mom like that? So like even in skate parks nowadays, like I maybe saw 2 or 3 other like either mixed or black kids like me at the skate park, and that was through probably from 7 to 10. And it's crazy to think that now you have all these people still coming out, and there's even more colored people going in to the rinks, or black people. Like everybody's going into like the parks now too.
Yeah.
And so it's great to see it, but we're still not being shown. It's still almost like having to be asked to be highlighted when it shouldn't have to be asked to be highlighted. They should just be like, oh man, that was tight. He did that, or she did that, or they did that. It's too structured. It should just be free thinking. You should just be able to say, hey, I want to push this person because I like the way they skate. And it's just being in a park all your life and skating alone and getting called all sorts of stuff just because you're on skates or a skateboard or whatever, because it's a toy or you're not a certain thing. It's a lot. I have a lot. Sorry.
That's okay. Don't apologize, because what you're saying is the experience that's happening.
And I don't know, like I maybe, and I don't know, many you're mixed, bombs. So you're like, I don't know who anybody else is mixed in here, but it's like a whole thing where it's like not being black enough, but not being white enough, and it spreads into like that self of yourself not understanding who you are, because you want to represent for your people and all that, but yet at the end of the day you're told you're not enough. And it's like that in itself is another, like, it's a racism that doesn't really compute at first until you realize, whoa, it's going towards me because I'm not full or I'm not all white.
Yeah.
And so I felt that a lot of the time when I go to rinks, where it's like I can't talk to either group because I'm not fully into that group, I guess.
Pardon me.
People like boxes, for sure. People like
So
sitting.
I don't know if you guys can see behind me. This is Lakeside.
That's dope.
We've got this huge fucking place that is so neglected. So this is where we could be skating. We have an entirely packed park. The fact that they don't open that because it won't turn into money, the fact that that's not an open space, shows us that we are only as good as $1. And that's something that we have to really change ourselves. Like, how do we take back skating so that it's not only meant to generate money? And I wanted to leave y'all with that because it's really dark in the park now. And so I really wanted to stay on, but my phone's dying. I'm sorry. But that's just to give you an idea, right? Like, when we talk about access, like, there's some spaces there. We're just not, that's okay. Oh, hi, sugar. We're just not allowed to, like, get to them. and we have to be controlled. We have to be policed, and we have to also make somebody money. That's a hard ass like pill to swallow, you know?
But I ask you, is Prospect Park funded by the public? It's a public resource, right? So how do you privatize that public resource?
So Prospect Park is, but the rink itself is actually owned by very rich developers, and it's the same developers that own Bryant Park. So you've got this business kind of implanted in, you know, in a park that's like, the rest of it is open to the public, but you've got this one kind of thing that's like going to the zoo, right? Like, you can go to the zoo, but you still have to pay a fare, and it's in a public park. I think it's kind of in that same realm, but the developers are like billionaires. They don't give a shit about who doesn't have access. They just want people who are going to pay. And as we know, our folks are usually very poorly paid. Economically, we're struggling, and all the other ways. So we're not that demographic that they want, because it's all tied to capitalism and to money.
Right. That's a big one for sure. It always. And then they open.
Right, so I'm going to head out. Thank you so much for allowing me to take up so much space.
Bye.
Stage and everyone else. Good luck. Thank y'all. I can't wait to watch the rest of it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, Ames.
So I just wanted to add, in terms of the developers that own like Lakeside and all that, they have this business, but it's only a business. They don't care necessarily about skating, because if they did, given our state with New York, it could still be like monitored the way that, you know, social distance could still be maintained and everyone still wear masks, and like the occupancy would be limited, but that space should be open in some capacity, because it's not just a seasonal thing. It's a year-round thing. It's just sitting there all neglected. Like, it looked terrible. We were on top of it today for our rollout, and it was really sad. It looked like a ghost town. And there's two rinks. There's one completely uncovered, and then there's one like the one that she showed that's half covered with like a little umbrella thing.
That's rough. And you guys have approached them and everything too. That's how you've learned about who owns it and how to get involved, how to use the space. And they won't let you use the space.
There's always so much pushback. Not unless there's a promise of a big turnout, which it shouldn't be about that. It should be, you know, daily admission from whatever time to whatever time, and whoever shows up, and you just take whatever profit you make or don't.
And they want it for like a block of time for a huge chunk of money.
Every time.
Yeah. That sounds familiar. That sounds like the exact talk that I got about the particular demographics. I'm serious.
Yeah.
That's what it sounded like. And then when I pushed on that, I got the answer of what they were doing, what it was about.
Shell, are you able to add in on this at all? I think we're still working.
Can you hear
me? Yeah, we can hear you. Go for it.
Yeah? Can you guys hear me? Yay!
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, particular demographics. I'm talking with the people that skate in the Carolinas in particular. Then last year they had a nice, wonderful event, but they had a hard time getting the event coordinated. And the whole goal was to get people that had not been skating in decades back out into the community, back into the rinks. So they were very successful. What the caveat was, the skating rink owners, managers, they said, we don't mind you doing that, but watch your numbers, basically. They didn't want a large crowd. But what happened was they had a call because a lot of the skaters showed up, literally showed up. And what happened here, the beginning of the year, when they were negotiating, trying to put it together. But now, in the full pandemic, they're not actually reaching, and they're seeing capital because they're seeing that there's potential for them to make a killing. And I think that they want to renegotiate the price because they saw what happened last year. So they're going to try to see how they can muscle this particular group to get more money out of them, which is sad. And then there's another group on Facebook that ready to do a call out of the skating rink Arizona doing similar practice in terms of being racially biased. So I think we can stay tuned. We'll see coming out of Arizona. And they've dealt with this particular rink. It's a USA establishment for about 10 years now. And it looks as though the rink was going to try to take away their adult night and have it their own self without the group that established a pattern of skaters coming to their state year after year after year after year. And they're actually, this skating rink was on my list of places to go in the next 2-3 years.
And Patricia, in the comments,
it's really,
yeah, it definitely is. And there's just like a little time difference in our audio, but Patricia Shelby in the comments said financial barriers are placed to ensure only the desired crowds are allowed access. When it sits empty, no money is coming in.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting to hear y'all's insight on. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, you can go ahead. Sorry. Okay. So I just thought that was interesting when y'all talked about like the 21 and over and 18 and up as well, when we talk about like accessibility, because like to me, kids in general need like that access and like an outlet to like have a place to be active and have freedom of expression and things like that. And so when there's like that cutoff and keeping them out of the rinks for like a designated time and things like that, it just seems like it's also like pushing back the community as well, not only on like a financial standpoint, but also like where they go.
I would also like to say it was specifically when a particular demographic was coming to the rink. So the other person who takes over that rink and has themed parties, there's no problem to have all ages, 18 plus or whatever. Never an issue, never any pushback. But when we come, especially when it's 18 and over, there's a whole bunch of pushback and more police and security is required. And then, of course, same thing applies for 21 and over. And now there's like possible alcohol involved because there is, for that rink, there is like a side bar situation that you can partake in. And so I guess, I don't know, Blackness, I guess, is just considered more dangerous all of a sudden. But if the demographic were different, none of that would be required. It would be totally fine.
I think the key is that this practice isn't all of a sudden, it's a carryover, it's a hangover of just some toxicity that, like, I'm really, really thankful that we're in this place where we get to have this discussion, you know, like literally 3 years ago it was like me crying in the car to my 10-year-old niece about this, you know, like I want her to be able to go someplace and have a beautiful time and like enjoy herself and not feel like she's being hounded or pressured or followed around for wearing a sweatshirt because she's 12. But I am noticing, or, you know, however old she's 16 now. But to be honest, like, I feel that there is something strange happening with the age of the kids too. Like, I'm noticing that at the rinks that are active here, there is an age limit. And then when the kid sessions are happening, there's like a totally different demographic that's coming to those kid sessions. And it's like, you guys talking about it here in this group now, I'm reflecting on it and seeing it and realizing that there's a correlation here. There's like a gap. It's strange.
Also keep in mind when it comes to just having kids, it's, you know, a lot of, for us, skating is strongly tied to music. And so when it's an all ages party, different type of music is played. And so that may be part of the reason why you don't see as many Black folk. But it's like, why is that not considered kid friendly? Just play the edited versions and it's fine.
And I noticed a lot of the, like, with the generations coming up, a lot of them think skating stops after you hit 18 because you're an adult, and they don't really think it goes anywhere else. And I started going to more Saturdays and Fridays and whatnot to skate how I want to skate, so that way these kids can see that there is more to it. It's not just that underlying situation.
Yeah.
Even though they can't come to our nights, I want them to still see how the skating is for us on our nights. Because I feel like if we're able to get that generation, whether it be whatever you are, it kind of shows them like, hey, that's cool, I want to do that. So they come up and they're like searching all these names, because they'll come up to me and ask me about a lot of different things. So for me to share my knowledge, it's like kind of sprinkling a seed around, and then they start searching up people like T-Stacks or Bill Butler or Chicago. Like people. I found out that people find Chicago and JB to be just the most amazing style ever. Like, more kids ask me to teach them how to do JB, and I cannot JB skate. It's just I'm not good at it. But I think.
But you're a really talented skater. Just saying.
But
you all are.
But I think going to these kids' night, even though it's like the worst music and it's never fun, us just being there and showing them that you're still able to go out and do this will help, I think, grow and spread and from Shell, because like I know she probably knows 1,000 things that I want to ask her about because she's been doing it for so long.
Right.
And there's a lot of history that I personally never got growing up because I moved so many times, and you only hear like a sprinkle here, sprinkle there, but it's like having people like Shell and like other people around, it would be a lot more beneficial to hear it. So if you could on another episode,
it would, yeah.
If you could on another episode, find maybe somebody from each region, maybe somebody from Atlanta, Detroit, Cali, just to come in and just speak for maybe 30, 40 minutes to give like a start to the history.
That'd be
Right.
awesome.
Yeah.
Noted. Like big time.
A lot of us won't know.
Because it is so regional.
It is, yeah.
And I only got a certain amount of knowledge from one guy who's moved here to San Antonio, luckily. So it's just, I think, having the ability to do this type of chat, but also to have just documented, just sit down and speak type videos would be helpful. Because I know there's not a lot of just like storytelling videos that just kind of tell what happened.
And I feel like, I know, like my cousin Kevin, like he's been skating since he was really young too. And whenever I see him, there's something new to learn. There's a little bit of something else to give, you know? And it is very much like, I'm looking in the comments here and it says we have to write and share our own history. Otherwise it has disappeared. So I feel like the storytelling aspect is so key to understanding this one little bit at a time.
I think there's a shift in media. Well, it's been happening, especially with the change in the conversation and a lot of people having a lot more resources to look and educate themselves on racial injustices. But there's now a shift of people now entering into these storytelling positions to have their ideas and these histories funded, like United Skates and Roller Dreams, to be broadcasted. So it's also like opportunities for sponsored, like these big skate companies or any companies that might have a budget that want to, you know, examine the different areas of roller skating, be it roller derby, the history of jam skating. They could apply this budget to people in these communities to tell their stories is also an added noted. So like I'm all for like hypothetical, but we know where the problem could be addressed and the story and the narrative could be changed.
Yeah. To be totally honest, like in the position that I have, that I've like worked really hard to get, and the platform that I've been able to be exposed to with the brand that I'm working with, like I've always wanted to tell that story, to go from place to place and meet people and talk and give people the opportunity to tell story, to like give them the platform for that. And I want you guys to know that that is my mission. And that is a goal in life that I've always saw for myself, like growing up as a child, you know? And like before I even moved down here to LA, I got a full-blown talk from my family at a table about representing the history and culture of our family and making sure that just to swing big and swing away at it. And I've collected like names and people and inspirations from different places. And like part of my like frustration is like the COVID distance and not being able to like go and be with people and skate with people and like commune and talk and interview. But maybe this is the new way that it has to be done, you know?
Yeah.
And adapting to that is just obviously what has to happen. So I hear you. Thank you very much for saying that, because I feel it so much like within me to like make that happen. It's such a goal.
And when people do make it, amplify it. If you have a large platform, continue to share it, especially if that person might not have a huge following, but if they're able to share a part of a culture that they've been deeply embedded in, amplify their voices. As an ally, you can do that.
Yes. Thank you.
And actually that brings us right into the next thing, which is talking about Black Lives Matter and the current movement, and the protests that have been taking part, and whatever you would like to discuss there.
It's cool. There's a lot happening. There have been, I know SkateWytch has been very active, doing it, working it.
Yeah, I'm happy to share what's been happening in Richmond, but I would, like I said, for the first part of it, I'll like, hang back and like listen in and stuff. I'm actually really curious to hear from Havoc and Rev on like how things are in Atlanta, just because I know it's very heightened there right now. But when I'm out and come home, I often miss the news. And I talked to Slippy recently, just checking in and stuff like that. But I'm curious to see how y'all are doing and what your experience has been there, and everybody else as well. So.
Well, our experiences have been mostly that of, I think, everyone else, like just focusing on COVID. And we are not as hands-on in the grassroots movement of Black Lives Matter to speak on like any ongoing protest or community organizing that has been happening in the Atlanta area, because certifiably it has been happening. I just can't speak on it. In the skating community wise, so one of the, I don't know if anyone here heard of the venue Cascade. I don't want to be like, but Cascade is like an institution in Atlanta, and especially from my understanding, the skating community, Cascade is very big. So they started opening up and having events, which it seems like the community is responding and responding well to that, but we haven't been jumping into it due to, again, COVID. Social distancing is very hard to like go to events and like, be around other people. But what I would say, especially to Boom, especially with this kind of platform that you have, this would be a great opportunity to invite, I think, Skate Fantasy, who put on the
she was invited to this.
Whenever she has the next available chance to definitely speak on her efforts of like trying to bring the whole activism and bring all wheels together and kind of creating a environment of unity across all like disciplines, which have been awesome. So she is way more grassroots on that, and she could totally provide way more insight than I possibly can.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Like, I have my son, and he's only like 8 months, so I can't really be out there catching stuff. So like, I've been doing everything that I possibly can, be between petitions, sharing as much info as I can, just letting people know what's going on. And there is a group here in San Antonio. It's a group of ladies called Roller Hose. I don't know if anybody knows them, but they're really doing a lot of they're doing a lot of work in the city, and they're
I'm gonna
actually
need them
helping.
to make more shirts.
Yeah.
But if you message them, see if you can get one of them on. They're one of the people who are like out there and in the street, like really stepping it up and pushing for it.
Dope. Shout out to Roller Hose, and I'm gonna add them on Instagram right now. I don't think I follow them yet.
Wow.
You're missing out. Get ready for some fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, I'm hyped now. Yeah.
But I do have to say, I am loving this like digital advocacy people are doing, you know, especially on TikTok with Gen Zers really kind of stepping up the game, and one trolling the president, which was awesome. Big ups to Gen Z, as well as like figure out new ways to share information about local officials that it hasn't necessarily been readily available unless you knew where to look. So I would say that's where most of my participation has been in the digital advocacy of this Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah, digital advocacy is key right now, most definitely. And I mean, there's so much to learn, and it's great. Like the network is ever expanding, so that's thrilling. It's also daunting, but it's thrilling.
Yeah. Shell, I don't know if you're comfortable talking about it, but Boom was telling me a little bit about an experience you and her had during one of the skate rollouts. And you have some experience with like de-escalation and things like that, from my understanding. I don't know if you're comfortable talking about it, but I would love to hear about it if you're willing to share.
Huh? I'm sorry. What happened?
That's okay. 1 second. Okay. Are we good now?
I think it just like is like a bit of like a delay, like a 5-second delay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I can re-ask if not. But Boom was telling me, Shell, about y'all going on.
Oh, I remember. I know what you were talking about.
Okay.
Are we talking about the gentleman in the park by the UN?
Yes. Yep. By the UN. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. Right. Oh, that guy. Okay. Yeah. The when we were rounding up and coming to a close with the whole protesting, I think it was Mike? I think he was, that he noticed that there was some activity going on, and we all kind of went toward another part of the protest. And so there was this guy, and he was hyper religious and just totally amped up, and he wanted everyone to pray with him. And what I noticed out the corner of my eye was 2 female officers that were actually about to approach him. So I actually took my hand out. I'm like, I got this, kind of like, don't approach him, just let it go. And he was like, he wanted everyone to pray with him, but everyone looked at him like he's nuts. Okay. But he was having some issues apparently. So what I did was I just kind of I took over. I said, okay, so he's praying, and he got mad. He said, everyone's not praying. She's praying. I said, well, I got this. I'm kind of like, I got this. So he starts talking, and then I had to repeat. I had to be his microphone. I had to repeat what he was saying, and sometimes he got long-winded. But at the end of the day, I was able to bring back to a point where he satisfied with the conversation, whatever was going on in his personal world, was able to engage him to a point that he didn't completely lose it, and then the police would have to just step in and try to take him down. I thought that they were going to do that, but when they see me talking with him, he felt good, and he was happy that I was able to have a conversation with him. But whatever it was that he was talking about, it just didn't make any sense, but it made sense to him. So, and I'm a licensed social worker, so I was able to kind of just process with him, pray with him, and he was satisfied. The next thing I know, he disappeared. He walked away, and there we go. Right, Boom?
Yep. That was that, but it was a really perfect example of the benefits of de-escalating.
Yeah, that's a big delay.
Yeah, I know. But it was a really great example of that, and the necessity for more of that, for more de-escalation training and education, for sure.
I would personally just love that. I've hosted a few rollouts and that were conjunctions with protests, and we've had mental health workers, social workers participate and really speak about the importance of navigating encounters like that in a calm way, and having the ability to learn how to do that and understand like the keys to it are, it's something that I would like to know more about personally.
Right.
I would love to learn more about it.
In Richmond, the reason I brought it up is to segue a little bit. Well, in Richmond, they have and I'm sure in a lot of the other cities as well, there's like a list of demands that the protesters are asking for. And one of our top demands is there is a gentleman whose name was Marcus David Peters in Richmond who about, I want to say 2 years ago, had a psychotic break, and his family had expressed that he was dealing with mental illness and things like that. And he took off to the nearby interstate and was in distress, but he stripped himself completely naked of all his clothes and was promptly shot and killed by police officers in Richmond. And there has been no action taken to discipline these officers or anything like that. So we want the case reopened, but the main organizers here are also asking for this thing called the Marcus Alert, which would be a call that basically would go out that if someone is clearly dealing with mental illness or showing signs of it and stuff, and they're in duress, that a social worker of some sort who is highly trained in this situation would then go with officers to respond to it. Or ideally, the other option would be that the officers have many, many more years of training so that they are prepared to handle that. And, we could talk all day on if you feel that you need to shoot somebody when they're clearly not armed, what does that say about, your job training and how you should even have a weapon in your hands? And not to get too into that, but Shell was very touched to hear your story, just because that has been at the center of a lot of our marches for sure. So.
Yeah, here in LA, that's what people are asking for as well, is more education and understanding on mental health needs, advocacy, financing. It would be beautiful if if the mental health of our community was taken more seriously.
Yeah.
It would be
I
beneficial.
don't properly train to, right. Yeah. I think that they're not well trained when it comes to that. They really not.
Also, a lot of police officers, example, in New York City, a lot of police officers that are stationed or patrol certain areas don't live in the areas that they patrol.
Yeah.
So there is a huge disconnect of even just a sense of community. If you feel like you're going into a community that you don't live in to regulate and police the people or the citizens, instead of being there as being a public service to the community members. So it's a whole big conversation, and I totally get the point, what everyone's trying to say, but where do you start of zeroing in on the issue?
I feel like the money where money is going and how it's being allocated is a big deal. Just like money with the rinks, money with the police, with community members. Just before we went on air, I was just taking a peek at a website that's a calculator for how finances are allocated in LA anyways. I don't know if this kind of calculator exists anywhere else, but it's called PCRC. And it essentially tracks where the funding goes, like where the funding from the police unions goes, how they use that. And a lot of it goes to particular people like the Los Angeles district attorney or the mayor or particular council members in certain districts, like thousands upon thousands and millions of dollars going towards individuals to pass or not pass policies that holds police more accountable for behavior and education and things like that. You know, so I feel like it does have a lot to do with the way that our cities budget our communities.
Yeah, I think what Brev was saying about, like, it's like, where do you even start? Like, there's so many different directions that it goes, and it's so, like, racism is so enrooted in, like, society in general that you're, like, breaking down literally centuries of bullshit and trying to, like, figure out how we can, like, re-educate ourselves and rework the system so it's not pushing down on people that it doesn't protect or serve. But yeah, I think it's like a very big topic. And when we're speaking about the protests in the cities, it's like, yeah, where do we start? Because I honestly don't even know where to start about the stuff in Richmond right now. But again, here to listen. So
to kind of speak on, I guess the sense of, like, so we're talking about policing and what they're kind of terming as defunding the police, which is, you know, I think it does make sense. We should do that. But not only that is, like, what's the intent that these police officers have in mind? Because there's these laws that have been put into place. I think they kind of reverted the stop and frisk that they did in the 90s within New York City. You know, I have been targeted with this stop and frisk movement that they did. So it's just like, my question is, it's like, you know, can we get police officers that are there to actually, you know, do a service, you know, and this whole idea of, like, you know, we only have like 2 numbers to call. You know, we call 911 if there's an emergency, and we call 411 if we need some kind of information. You know what I'm saying? And I'm sure there's other stuff we can do, but there's no one that we can call that'll show up to the house if, say, there's, like, you know, some kind of disturbance that's not necessarily life-threatening or something like that. You know, we're calling too much on one entity, and this entity from the start doesn't necessarily have people that look like me in their best interest, you know. So yeah, I'm just kind of just talking out on, you know, I guess self experiences and you know.
Yeah, this is what this environment is for. Absolutely, so people can hear that, because I think a lot of people are probably experiencing a lot of similar things, and so hearing it from other people is important.
So I also would like to see how this conversation could be of benefit to those who want to be allies in the roller skating community. And now that we're talking about police brutality, no, we're not. Well, you know, defunding the police, basically. How as an ally can you help fellow skaters of color during these times? Can there be conversations of having more community-based, like roller skating centered protesting events? Can there be a cross-pollination between one discipline that is heavily populated by one demographic, trying to introduce and intermingle with another demographic? So an example, roller derby going out into the jam skating community, artistic skaters going out to park skaters. Like we have a platform, right, where we could actively try to do something with other people who share the same similar interests in the same niche. It doesn't matter. It could be like artistic skating, park skating, roller derby. We all share that one apparatus, the roller skate. So how can we speak on building a unifying experience and also calling in and calling out areas in which these kind of areas have been siloed, why they've been siloed, and why those, especially those the powers that be in those disciplines, are comfortable with allowing it to be that way, and as a community holding them accountable to follow suit.
I feel like this conversation is such a jumping off point to really explore all of that stuff. I feel I already start to see some of these things happening, and I'm excited to see where it goes, but we need more.
Yeah, like even at RollerCon, I noticed like like the way the demographic was is there are very few Black people who do derby. I noticed that right off the bat.
Yep.
And then they had like games where they had like specific themes and whatnot, and I was like, okay. But then when they came to the park, I noticed everybody was kind of helping each other, like changing that. But it's her idea of like wanting to unify everybody to help start pushing towards a better skate community makes sense, because I know of a few people who played derby that came into the park and then eventually got them to go to an adult night and they're like, oh, I didn't know this existed, or I didn't know this was a thing, or
Yeah.
I didn't know people skated like this.
Yeah, and Shell's messaging me. I'm sorry, I'll let you finish, but she has something to say about this too.
Okay. I just think it's us having to put, and it's weird that we have to put ourselves in certain situations to help grow when we shouldn't have to do that. But I think us jumping into another scene, trying to do it, because that'll give us the ability to spread our words, and then they can spread their words back, and then we bring them to us, or we go to them. And I think it's just a matter of everybody trying something new rather than trying to stay tight and huddled with your group.
Yeah.
It's a clique type situation.
Break the clique, expand, try something new. Get yourself out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, and Shell, just ping-ponging exactly off of what you guys are talking about, she mentions that there's two major reasons that she's seen, which is we have the majority that does not want to hear anything that we have to say, and then when we have our own grouping of people that become quiet and never step up. Lots of politics, specifically skate politics. So again, kind of relaying on this like grouping that you guys are discussing. And that was Shell's quote on Facebook Messenger.
Yeah.
I find that the reason we are discussing roller skating currently is because it's something we're all involved in. But how I've always felt is the reason that we are able to call in so much with roller skating is because it is a smaller subset and it is a thing that we're all invested in, but it is much more attainable to try to correct and like call in wrongs and things like that and try to get people to make proper change versus like in a wider scope of like how things are currently going on outside of the skate community. It's one of us alone isn't enough. We need more people. So my thoughts have been with like the way like we've been doing like the rollouts and things like that. I am all for that. I went to one today. However, what I'm seeing, especially with COVID going on, is people are going to rollouts, but then those same allies will not come to other protests that are not necessarily on skates. And that to me makes me ask the question of, why are you comfortable putting yourself in that situation, but not at the front lines necessarily, or in other scope of things where we need you even more? You know what I mean? Like, it's not just a thing you can go to for a temporary amount of time. Like, this is ongoing. And just as an ally, I'm like, this is where I see the most damage happening. I don't see like a lot of conflict happening at rollouts, and we did have it happen here, but just at the protests in general, I'm seeing our numbers dwindle and dwindle and dwindle. And at least here, the police have not let up. So more people are put at risk, and then more people are put into jail, and it just is an ongoing cycle. So while I want to ask like what I can do to help the roller skating community currently, all of my energy goes into the actual protests, because I can be a body and put myself out there and be physically present. And I know not everybody can, but if I can start there and then work my way back and bring that information to the skate community, then I'm doing what I can, you know?
Yeah. I was talking to a friend of mine recently, and she does a lot of art work and BLM work and activism and stuff. And she was saying sometimes you have to find yourself where you are and make the work happen where you are. And so whether that's at home or in your specific group, we're learning how to hold not only ourselves accountable and find what we're truly capable of, and then sharing that with our loved ones, sharing that with our community, like exactly what you're talking about. Is what we have to do anywhere. So where you're able and capable is we just need you right now, wherever that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally commend your passion of like wanting people to like, yeah, you know, I'm glad you're coming out for a skating thing, but please also come out to this protest I'm holding. But to definitely jump on the last point, for sure. You just got to meet people where they're at. And you have a privilege of having an audience who share the same interests as you. So if they're only willing to listen to you with roller skates on, then exploit it. Then do it with roller skates on, you know?
Yeah.
But I definitely commend your passion for wanting people to do more.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think in itself, it's a privilege for me to be out there as well. You know what I mean? Like, I am not as much of a risk if I'm out there. I already know from my coworkers that if something does happen to me while I'm out there, that they will back me and make sure that I'm taken care of. And not everybody has that. And I also know that there are, because I'm like a Latinx woman, that there are also other concerns that could happen if I am arrested. So it's just a matter of like, do what you can when you can. We don't have to get into it right now, but I have like a list of like things that I have seen and gotten information on how you can be involved. That is not just simply sending emails or phone calls. And if you feel like you can't march, but we can talk about that later on and stuff as well.
That's amazing. That's an excellent resource. I want to know what those are.
Share it. Yeah, share it now. Share it.
Please share.
I just want to make sure everybody gets a chance to talk, because I don't want to take over this conversation. Like, I've been very active.
Yeah.
But this is still like a place for everybody else to share what's going on, and I don't want to.
That's also very pertinent information. So I think everyone could take a hot break for like pertinent information to be shared.
All right. Well, let me get my notes out. So a lot of this information has come from actually a very specific person in our community. Called her Instagram handle is Campaign Mama, and she labels herself as a strategist. So I met her at a thing that was held at City Hall, which we labeled as Reclamation Square because the people wanted to hold space there and reclaim it. That was about 2 weeks ago. And by 11 o'clock that night, I had left for the evening, but the people that were still there, I just need to say it because it needs to be very clear. When I was leaving, they were watching were getting ready to watch Do the Right Thing. They were setting up a movie. They had these things called teach-ins where they had like separated us into Black and people of color in one side to have like kind of a discussion on how we're doing mentally and physically and how we're handling things. And then the other group was made up of white allies who needed to have serious conversations about their internal white supremacy, how they can be better allies, how they can be better protesters, not speaking over people and things like that. But anyway, so I left, and within about 30 minutes, the cops came up and tear gassed and pepper sprayed and kept people from getting to their cars, and then would refuse to let them get to their cars at the same time, which then would get towed. And if you had a charge from previously at the protest, it is then a felony count if you get a secondary charge. So it's just like a cycle of entrapment. But anyways, Campaign Mama went, and she's spoken a few times at some of the other protests. So some of these things are from her. I've actually sent this to A-Bomb, and I think I've sent it to Boom in the past just before, but if anyone else wants it, I can try to find it again.
I'll add it to the chat.
Cool. Yeah. She talks about, like, in this Google Doc that she made, the importance of both making phone calls and emails. And she also, in this document, made it to where everyone could get a hold of it. And it broke down the roles of our personal, like, city elected officials and all that, so that you had a better understanding of what their job is and who you're speaking to, so that it's not just using the script. Using the script is fine if that's all you can do, but typically those will get filtered through and not read. So one of the things that I thought was really funny is she talked about the use of memes and public callouts, because while emails are professional, when we publicly shame people on Twitter and with, like, the media in general, they tend to get more of a reaction out of them. So there's entire pages dedicated to this now in Richmond, which is pretty great. But then what I have seen is people in the city presenting things at marches and at Marcus David Peters Circle, which is the former site of the Lee Monument. It's still there, but we'll get to that at another time. Where they've put up little libraries that have, like, I have, like, piles and piles of, like, pamphlets and, like, information on, like, needle exchange programs, hotlines for mutual aid, like housing resources, trail cleanups. They also have made things for, like, knowing your rights, what to do if you're, like, you know, stopped by a police officer. And then on top of that, there's also, like, more, like, intense, like, information that's, like, changing a way of thinking, kind of, and why, like, we should talk more about defunding the police and like the borders and things like that as well. But so I think, like, if you're not able to go out to a march, I feel like if you're someone that is a writer or even is able to print mass amounts of things like that, providing that as a service to these groups can be a huge help, or just even getting in touch with the local organizations, because that has been the thing I have seen and has inspired me the most in Richmond, is because I've only lived here 2 years, but I have never been more proud to be a brown woman and to be more in touch with my, like, culture, because of seeing, like, all these people in my community speak out, but then also all these different organizations that are, like, taking care of each other through mutual aid and through healthcare work and just, like, cleaning up the areas like that. That overall, if anything else, has been, like, super eye-opening and inspiring. I'm going to try to get through these fast. On top of all this stuff, there is also the ability to print legal stuff for the ACLU, because they need things handed out, just basically like little pamphlets you can put in your pocket with, like, bail phone numbers and things like that. Someone that was not able to protest, but I went to a class for, is they led a medic class. So if you have any kind of EMT training, you could give people a class on how they can be street medics, which we usually covered how to work with internal bleeding and bullet wounds, which is all very scary, but also things like how to treat tear gas and pepper spray. Let's see. Sorry, this is a lot. I've been just, like, collecting this stuff for a few weeks. Self-defense classes. While we don't want anyone to get into it with officers, if you can, like, you should, you know, remain as calm as possible. There are opportunities, at least in Richmond here, where you might be stopped by someone that is not an officer but wants to confront you because of the color of your skin or because you're just a protester in general. And so I think being able to lead, like, community classes with like self-defense, even yoga, and like providing like mental health services. Like we've had somebody lead that recently where they just like had people sign up and they hosted like a socially distant like just like chat where they could talk about like how you can do different meditation and things like that. I think that's super important right now. You can assist in union organizations because in Richmond we have multiple organizers in the city, but one of the big ones is Richmond Strike and Richmond Tenants Union, because during COVID, a lot of people are out of work and therefore they are getting evicted from their places, most recently on the 1st. And that is leaving people homeless. And, you know, obviously that's going to affect the Black and like people of color more than it is most. And it just trickles down. And we have like a whole thing on like how eviction is violence. This is a lot. I'm sorry. Fundraising.
Good. No, this is good.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm just like, let me give you all the things. Something else that I've been working on with a few people is just doing different fundraisers. Someone gave me a pair of knee pads today that were brand new, and they were just like, hey, if you can raffle this off at some point, use this. I'm doing shirts right now. I have friends that can't protest, but they want to make art. So they're sending in like pieces and having me use my platform for that, which I know not everybody has a large platform, but like things circulate, you know, when you can do something simple like that. Like I tie-dyed tote bags. It took me like 5 minutes for the most part. I took a couple tries at it, but that's not important. And then something else that I just found out about is you can actually put in applications to be legal aid observers at protest, where you don't have to be as at the front lines, but you have to go through the ACLU and they like have you like sign up for it first. And I think there's like some steps to it, but basically your job would be to then come to a protest and stand back and be uninvolved, but to take notes. So if anything happens between the protesters and the police or in general, like you have like a witness like there for you. Yeah. So all that. And if you're not comfortable with those things, something that I've been trying to do to not get burnt out is just going and inserting myself in different demonstrations that are a little bit more diverse. So I went to a ceremony at the African Burial Grounds last week, and I've recently went to my first like Indigenous Peoples picnic for the 4th of July. And that felt like a way better way to celebrate it. And there's also a virtual book club that has been started by some skateboarders that I joined. And they're starting out with articles because not everybody wants to sit down and read a book, but you can spend like, you know, a couple minutes reading like a speech. And I think we're reading Angela Davis's The Meaning of Freedom to start with that. And I sent Boom the link to that as well.
Yes, let me pull it up.
All those things. So I'm sorry, that was a lot, but there's so much more that everyone can be doing that I am still learning about and have been so inspired by the people that are organizing these events that I'm like, okay, I've got to find ways to keep myself super active. But at some point, even if you're not at the marches themselves, like, or the demonstrations, making phone calls and emails every single day is eventually going to exhaust you as well. So there are so many different things that people can like look into. And I think everybody, at least in Richmond right now, is asking themselves like, what comes next? Because at this point we've kind of had like a lull this week, and we've still had, you know, demonstrations, but it's been very like we're talking about organizing, but no one's actually doing anything. And I'll just like leave it at that. So anyone that has feedback on that, what to do next, I want to know.
I mean, literally after we're done here speaking together, I'm actually heading to a meeting to focus on what to do next. And I feel that there is a burden of just feeling the endurance like that's necessary to sustain this, you know, is unavoidable, you know. I myself feel very tired, but we need to keep working. We need to stay attentive and pay attention and do our best to guide our neighbors, family members, people that we work with. For me, you know, the audience that you have, the platform that you have, it's, I mean, it's just been a really heavy period in time, and that's just unavoidable, and it has to just be accepted that it's going to be heavy, and you've got to just keep going. Like, we have to keep going. It's just what it is. So I'm going to a meeting tonight. Talking with you all today is incredibly inspirational. Ames, I've been wanting to talk to for a very long time. Like, I was hoping to get to New York before they closed the 14-day hold, but that probably wouldn't have been smart to do anyway. So I was just feeling so stir crazy. I wanted to get out and get over there, but we just have to continue to do the work where we are. You know?
Yeah. So as we wrap up, any final thoughts, feels, suggestions, etc.?
I'm just stoked to meet you guys and see you digitally. It's pretty cool. This is nice.
Yeah, this was really nice. Great conversation. It was awesome to hear a little bit of that history that I wouldn't have heard otherwise today. So please, let's have like more of these conversations, and I'd love to hear a lot more jam skater history and point of view.
For sure.
So.
More.
To kind of like touch on what Rev mentioned, definitely, I can say that I definitely learned something today. Also kind of opened my eyes to certain things as well. And I think it's definitely a good thing we're trying to do here is coming together as random people in a large community, and just kind of expressing our sentiments, feelings, and you know what we're doing to outreach our community, to kind of like further educate ourselves, our allies, so I think this is just one other, one small step, as they say, right?
I think most of the time when we do, like, people think, oh, like, skating is a small community, but it's like that whole idea of when one talks to another, that one tells two, that one tells three. I think that's why it's so important, I think, on this platform, one, because it is skate related, because this is where we all are coming from each side of the sport or art, or however you want to call it.
You can definitely call it art.
But I think because we all do different things, like, it spreads out way more than if we were to just kind of be doing something else. Because I think there's so many more open minds and not controlled minds in this whole entire system that it allows us to push more out rather than just stick to our own sport. Because I noticed a lot more from the roller skating community that there's more of like a sense of pushing to skateboarding, and then skateboarding will push to like their homes and their families. And I think starting here is what grows everything.
Yeah.
And even if it's from one person not wanting to show up to something, but they'll show up to another thing, I think that's in the back of their mind now, like, well, why am I not doing that?
Yeah.
Rather than actually helping.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, do you got anything?
Oh, yes. But SkateWytch and Sage, do you want to chime in? Final thoughts?
I think I would just say, let Black people own rinks so that they can reinvest in their own communities.
Can I share a little quick history, actually? Speaking of Black-owned rinks, please hold. There was a Black-owned rink. Well, actually, there's been a few, but one of them historically, as I struggle, was Rollercade in Detroit. Thank you. I don't know why I was thinking like not the right city, but anyway. So here's a quick picture of that. So it's kind of great that you mentioned that, because yeah, that's a really cool thing there.
Yeah, Black-owned rinks for sure. Yeah. Most definitely. And then that knocks on the door of the association as well.
That or even like community-owned rinks, you know. I think that'll help out a lot in a different, maybe another stream.
Independent,
Shell has thought bubbles. She's ready to. She's got a lot of feels about this one. I know it. We've talked about it.
That's good. Boom, were you saying something?
Yes, and I had myself muted. SkateWytch. Did you have any final thoughts of things you wanted to say?
She
smells nice.
Can you hear me? Oh, no, we were waiting for you to talk.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought Shell was going to say something.
No, I got messages.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I think what I want everybody to walk away from is to realize that the problems that we are currently facing are not alone to the skating community, and to take that opportunity to get to know your community members, not just within the skate community, but also in your city. Because again, if I've gotten anything out of what's been going on, it's, you know, things are real bad right now, but also like there are some really, really amazing leaders in your community, and you could be one of them. You don't have to be like on some big platform to make a change, and to just like, you know, see what you can do in smaller ways, you know? So.
And even if that's learning a new discipline and getting out of your comfort zone, like get on it, do it.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're coming from a derby league and you want to attract more people, also think of ways of like music at your games. Okay, ask yourself, does this seem like it's a very eclectic, you know, sound of music? Mm-hmm. Question what your definition of eclectic is. Do you feel like you're only playing 80s and pop, like 90s, 2000 pop music? And do you feel like that's really speaking to a lot more people than you can? So there's areas in which people could definitely start taking some closer look on how they could be a little bit more inclusive, and looking at the space that they do hold and questioning how you could make this a little bit more inclusive or inviting for people who don't look like you, even though you're not familiar with it.
Yeah. Nice.
Okay, well, I got some, I'm just going to read some of the comments in the chat group real quick. Kiana's here and they say hi, and they also say this is such great information. Thank you. So shout out to SkateWytch with the awesome list of useful things. We posted it in the comment. Along with Skaters Against Racism, we also talked about Roller Hose, so I added that there. We talked about Bill Butler, so I added that in the comments as well. Patricia Shelby, a big shout out to Patricia Shelby. She's been commenting for our entire chats. Thank you for staying this entire time. Also, shout out to Quan, has been here for the majority of it as well. But Patricia said something really important here right at the end of our chat, and she stated this is an endurance race, not a sprint. And I think that that's a really powerful statement that was made. And then Shell's got quite a couple of things that she wanted to add for last thing. She wanted to make a couple of shout outs to quad skater Chris Nelson. We have a roller speed skater Sonic, really great resources for anyone looking to get into quad skating or speed skating, those are two great people to search. So I'll type that into the chat as well. And she also says that this has been great. She just wishes that the internet was not being such a jerk. And also that she's super happy to see this generation stepping up and pushing for change. And Tor Clark, happy birthday. So shout out. And I don't know if it said the first name right. Tor Clark, I hope I didn't butcher it. I'm so sorry if I did. Another thing of what JaQuan said earlier about the interviews, 110%. And I think the first person that I intend on interviewing would be Shell. So she can come through and tell her story and all the history. She's got a lot of information and a lot of really excellent action steps as well for the skate community to consider. I'm just going to ultimately summarize what Shell has told me in a phone call prior, but ultimately, we all have these organizations and these groups and these projects that we're working on that are skate related. We love skating, we love whatever type of skating we do. We love it. And at the end of the day, something that Shell mentioned is really getting together and pulling these groups, pulling these companies, pulling whatever you're doing together and becoming more one in this whole process, and how that can improve the skate environment as a whole. Also standing up against these skate rinks and their BS. There's, as Shell mentioned earlier, there is an upcoming skate doc that's going to be coming out from Arizona about some really not so great stuff that was happening there, but it was recorded. So, we got some proof that this stuff is happening. So that's all I got to say. Other than thank you guys. This is really important. And thank you for taking the time out of your day to speak about these things. More to come.
Thank you for the invite.
Thank you. Yeah.
Also, I'm Quan in the YouTube.
Quan. Oh.
I was watching it as I was on it.
Confession.
Well, see you later. I told you I butcher names, right? Let's just hope it's just one time. Fun fact, we've met more than once in person. You would think I'd get it right eventually. Sorry.
Oh, no. I was saying on the YouTube, the comments.
Oh, you're Quan.
Yes.
Why? Oh.
Because I wanted to respond to people.
I was like, yo, did I butcher your name? Like, I really am sorry. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so shout out.
All right. Now that we're all laughing, that was pretty heavy talk.
Yeah, it was super heavy. I hope you guys have a good night. Thanks again for this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to meet everyone.
Y'all be safe. Enjoy your night.
Stay safe.
At some point, those of you we met.